On the day Jessica was reborn and returned to the family compound, Chloe's name was already written on the military-dependent relocation documents resting on the table. Chloe's eyes were red, her fingers still lingering on the edge of the form. Seeing Jessica walk through the door, she immediately pulled her hand back. "Jessica, please don't misunderstand." Jessica stood at the doorway, looking down at the thin application form. In the name box, the name Chloe had already been half-written. These were the documents that needed to be sent to the neighborhood committee and the work unit tomorrow for their official stamps. The stamps hadn't been affixed yet, but the pen had already been put to paper. Chloe's voice was very soft, as if she were afraid of startling someone. "I'm not trying to steal your spot. Hey everyone, ever sacrificed your dreams for love only to be taken for granted? Today we follow Jessica. Given a second chance against her toxic in-laws, she finally refuses to back down. Let's dive in." The room suddenly fell silent. David stood by the square wooden table in his military uniform. His back was straight, his expression cold and detached. He looked exactly as she remembered, the young, promising, and steady man praised by everyone in the compound, the absolute best catch in the eyes of all the older women. Martha sat by the table, holding an enamel mug. The bottom of the mug scraped against the tabletop, making a very soft sound. She looked at Jessica, her brow furrowing. "Jessica, you're back, just in time." Jessica didn't say a word. Martha pushed the application form toward her, then, as if remembering something, quickly stopped. "You know Chloe has a weak constitution," Martha said. David took over the conversation. "The conditions at the military base are a bit better. It will be good for her health to stay there for a while." Chloe immediately lowered her head. "David, please stop." She bit her lip, tears welling up in her eyes. "If Jessica minds, I don't have to go." Everyone looked at Jessica, making it seem like if she asked even one more question, she would be the unreasonable one. In her previous life, Jessica had taken a step back right at this moment. She had thought Chloe was only going to stay for a short while, only to find out later that Chloe had gone first to secure her position, while Jessica went later only to be the workhorse. To join her husband at the base, Jessica had given up the chance to become a permanent worker at the textile factory. She had gone to the military compound with 2 new cotton quilts, a camphor wood chest, and the $36 of dowry her mother had left her. Later, David's family's tuition fees, ration tickets, and social obligations all fell squarely on her shoulders, one by one. She bore the burden until her job was gone, her dowry was depleted, and even her health was ruined. In the end, when David earned a merit citation and was transferred, everyone claimed that it was Chloe who had stayed by his side through the hardest years. Right before she died, Jessica was still clutching that long, invalidated letter of introduction for employment. The letter bore her name, Jessica, but that job had ultimately gone to Dennis. Martha's voice pulled Jessica back to the present. Seeing that Jessica hadn't spoken for a long time, Martha's face darkened. "Jessica, you child, why are you pulling a long face the moment you walk through the door?" Jessica looked at the application form on the table. The paper was clean, but the name written in the box was glaring. Chloe was still looking down, wiping her tears. "Jessica, please don't be mad at David. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have troubled you guys in the first place." David glanced at Chloe, his brows furrowing. When he looked back at Jessica, his tone had grown colder. "Jessica, Chloe isn't an outsider." Jessica nodded. "Okay." The people in the room all froze for a moment, probably not expecting her to take it so calmly this time. David's expression softened a bit. "It's good that you can understand." Martha also breathed a sigh of relief and immediately said, "Exactly. You all grew up in the same compound. There's no need to bicker over every little thing." Jessica walked over to the table and looked down at the application form. "Where is she going to stay?" The room fell silent again for a moment. Chloe's fingers slowly tightened around the hem of her shirt. "She'll stay at my place for now," David said. Jessica looked up at him. "Your dorm?" He frowned. "Housing at the military compound is tight. It's hard to make temporary arrangements." Martha chimed in. "It's just temporary. Chloe has a weak constitution. We can't just leave her with nowhere to stay." Jessica nodded. "So she's using my dependent relocation quota to live in your housing." David's expression changed. "Jessica, do you really have to talk like that?" "I'm just confirming." Jessica looked at him. "Whose quota is it? Whose housing is it? Whose name is this paperwork for?" The room went completely quiet. David's face darkened. "Jessica, that's enough." Jessica pushed the application form back in front of David. "There's no need to fight over it." David's frown deepened. "What do you mean?" "I'm saying, I'm not going to the military base anymore," Jessica said. As those words fell, it was as if someone had hit a mute button in the room. The enamel mug in Martha's hand tilted, spilling tea onto the table. The aggrieved expression on Chloe's face froze. David looked at her, his eyes growing colder by the second. "Jessica," he said, "don't use something like this to throw a tantrum." Jessica looked back at him. "It's not a tantrum. I'm simply not going." Martha finally snapped out of her daze and stood up abruptly. "Fine, you don't have to go to the base," she blurted out, "but the wedding is still on." Jessica looked at Martha. "Not going to the base, not living together, and not getting a marriage certificate. What exactly would I be marrying for?" Martha's face stiffened. "Child, what kind of nonsense are you talking about? Marriage is a major event for both our families. You can't just call it off on a whim." Jessica nodded. "Then let's discuss it as a major event between the two families." Thinking Jessica was about to back down, Martha looked slightly relieved. "First, give me back my things," Jessica said. Martha's expression froze again. David also looked up at her. "What things?" Jessica stared right at Martha. "My letter of introduction for the job at the textile factory." As soon as she said that, the room became so quiet that one could hear the dripping sound of the spilled tea from the enamel mug. Martha's eyes darted away shiftily. Denise, who had been standing at the door to the inner room watching the drama unfold, subconsciously took a half step back when she heard this. That letter of introduction was something Jessica's father had secured for her after pulling strings and making 3 trips to the factory office. The propaganda department at the textile factory had been short-staffed. The factory management had stated that since Jessica was a high school graduate, had good handwriting, and could read scripts well, she could come in as a temp first. Once she passed the year-end evaluation, she would become a permanent employee. Back then, Martha had sounded sweeter than anyone else. "Jessica, you're about to marry David. Why bother going to work at the factory? Once you join him at the base, the conditions will be better there, and a job can always be arranged later. Leave the letter of introduction with me for now, just in case you lose it." Later, Jessica followed him to the military compound, and that letter of introduction never made it back into her hands. Half a year later, Denise joined the textile factory, taking a position in that exact same propaganda department. Martha told outsiders that the family had used their connections to find the job for their younger daughter. Jessica had asked about it once back then. David had simply said, "Denise is young and needs a job. You're already at the military base, so stop making a fuss over these things." After that, Jessica never asked again. Back then, Jessica had been so bogged down with chores for David's family that she had forgotten she was supposed to have her own path in life. Martha set her enamel mug back down on the table. "What letter of introduction?" "I don't remember." Jessica looked at her. "It's fine if you don't remember. The factory office will." Martha's face changed. "That letter of introduction was issued to me by the textile factory," Jessica said. "It has my name on it. If you don't give it back, I'm going straight to the factory office right now to report it missing." Denise finally couldn't hold back anymore. "You're going to the military base anyway. What do you need the letter of introduction for?" Jessica looked at her. "Who said I'm going to the base?" Denise was left speechless. Jessica pressed on. "And how did you know the letter of introduction wouldn't be of use to me anymore?" Denise's face paled slightly. Martha immediately scolded her. "Denise, go back to your room." Denise didn't move. Her fingers gripped the door curtain, the panic in her eyes impossible to hide. Jessica stared right at her. "You have my letter of introduction." Denise's lips trembled. I just took a look at it." "Where did you look at it?" Jessica asked. Denise fell silent. Martha's face darkened. "Jessica, do you have to make such a scene today and embarrass everyone?" "No," Jessica replied. "I just want my own things back." David finally spoke up. "Jessica," he said, his tone softer than before. "I'll get to the bottom of the letter of introduction later." Jessica looked at him. "Ask who?" David froze. "Are you going to ask your mother or your sister?" Jessica pressed. David's brows furrowed. "There's no need to make it sound so ugly." "Then let's make it sound nice," Jessica said, keeping her eyes on him. "Where is my letter of introduction for employment right now?" No one in the room answered. Chloe stood off to the side, tears still streaking her face. "Jessica," she said softly, "Aunt Martha was probably just keeping it safe for you. Please don't let this drive a wedge between you and David." Jessica turned to her. "Chloe?" Chloe stiffened. "Your name is the one written on the military dependent relocation form," Jessica told her. "It is not your place to make excuses for David's family regarding my letter of introduction." Chloe's face turned pale. David immediately frowned. "Jessica, Chloe just means well." "Meaning well is fine," Jessica said, but don't touch other people's things." At those words, Denise's face went even whiter. Jessica ignored Chloe and turned back to Martha. "Give me back the letter of introduction before tonight." Martha sneered. "Who do you think you're scaring? Your family doesn't run the factory office." "No, they don't," Jessica replied, "which is exactly why I need to go report it missing. And while I'm at it, I'll ask them if taking someone else's letter of introduction to inquire about a job counts as impersonation." Denise's head snapped up. Martha's face completely drained of color. David also turned to look at Denise. "Denise?" Denise bit her lip, her eyes instantly welling with tears. "David, I just wanted to see it. Mom said Jessica was going to join you at the base sooner or later anyway, so leaving that letter of introduction around would just be a waste." Halfway through her sentence, she suddenly realized what she had confessed and snapped her mouth shut. A heavy silence fell over the room. Jessica nodded. "I see. So it's all been doled out already." Martha panicked. "What do you mean, doled out? We're all family here. Why do you have to make it sound so nasty?" Jessica looked at her. "But we aren't married yet, and now we're not going to be." Martha's face flushed crimson. "You wouldn't dare!" Jessica ignored her, turning around to walk out. David stepped forward, blocking her path. "Where are you going?" "The factory office," Jessica replied. His jaw tightened. "It's almost time to get off work now." "Then I'll go to my dad's work unit first," Jessica said, looking up at him. "He was the one who got the letter of introduction for me in the first place, so he knows exactly who to look for to get the paperwork replaced." David stood at the doorway and didn't step aside. His face was very dark. "Jessica, the situation isn't clear yet. If you go to the factory office now, you'll only blow a small matter out of proportion." Jessica looked at him. "A small matter?" David's brow furrowed tightly. "So," Jessica said, "writing Chloe's name on the military-dependent relocation form first is a small matter. My letter of introduction for employment going missing is also a small matter. Then what exactly constitutes a major issue to you?" He was left speechless by her questions. Martha immediately took over the conversation. "Don't you go pointing fingers at David. He's a soldier, and it's not easy for him to make a trip back home. You just have to cause a scene at a time like this. What will the neighbors think if they hear you?" Jessica glanced at the half-open door. The wind blew up a corner of the door curtain. Outside, people had already started to slow their footsteps. That was just how things were in the family compound. If a pot lid clattered in one house, the neighbors next door would know whether they were having porridge or noodles for dinner. Chloe finally spoke up, her voice very soft. "Jessica, this is all because of me." She looked up, tears hanging from her eyelashes. "If you really mind this much, I can just not go." As soon as she said this, David turned to look at her. "Chloe?" Chloe shook her head, as if she had made a huge decision. "David, I can't let you and Jessica fight because of my health." As she spoke, she reached out to take the application form on the table. Her movements were very slow, slow enough to let everyone clearly see her grievance. "I'll cross my name out." Martha panicked. "Chloe, you child, why are you being so sensible?" David also frowned. "Don't be ridiculous." Jessica stood where she was, watching Chloe's fingers land on the edge of the application form. She didn't actually pick up the pen. She just pressed down on the corner of the paper, as if waiting for someone to stop her. In her previous life, Jessica had backed down right at this moment. This time she nodded. "Okay." Chloe's movement froze. The room was quiet for a second. Jessica looked at her. "Since you can just not go, then cross it out right now." The tears were still hanging on Chloe's face, but panic clearly flashed in her eyes. Martha slammed her hand on the table. "Jessica." Jessica looked at Martha. "Didn't she just say she doesn't have to go?" Martha's chest heaved with anger. "She's just being sensible. She doesn't want to put you in a difficult spot." "She said she could not go, and I said okay," Jessica replied. "How does that make it me, putting her in a difficult spot?" Martha choked on her words. David's voice turned cold. "Jessica, Chloe is in poor health. She can't handle you backing her into a corner like this." Jessica looked at him. "She said she didn't have to go, and I simply agreed. Who exactly is backing who into a corner?" His Adam's apple bobbed, but he couldn't get a word out. Chloe's eyes grew even redder. She said in a low voice, "David, please don't fight with Jessica over me." Jessica looked at her. "Chloe." Chloe looked up at her. "There's no need to say that a second time," Jessica said. Chloe froze. "If you're really afraid of us fighting, then cross your name out." Chloe's face drained of color bit by bit. Outside, someone murmured in a low voice, "Didn't Chloe say she wouldn't go herself?" Martha immediately looked up and yelled toward the door. "What are you looking at? We're discussing family matters." The footsteps outside scattered a bit, but they didn't go far. David lowered his voice. Jessica, do you insist on making a joke out of us for everyone to see? She looked at him. I didn't write the joke. He was speechless for a moment. Jessica walked to the table and picked up the application form. Martha instinctively reached out to grab it. Jessica took a step back. What are you doing? Martha's voice grew shrill. Look closely, Jessica said. Not only is Chloe's name half written on the application form, but in the relationship column, the word dependent is also written. She turned that section toward David. What kind of dependent is she to you? David's face finally changed. Martha abruptly stood up. I'm the one who told them to write it like that first. After she spoke, the room grew even quieter. David turned to look at his mother. Martha only then realized she had let slip the truth. She immediately added, I just thought we'd submit the paperwork first. Later, after you two get married, we can add your name in. Jessica looked at her. Then when were you planning on letting me know? No one in the room answered. Jessica continued to ask, when Chloe arrived at the military base, when she moved into David's housing, or when I went over there with my dowry to cook and do laundry for you all. Chloe's fingers, which were pressing on the application form, slowly tightened. Jessica, please don't say that. I never thought about taking your things. Jessica looked at her hand resting on the application form. Then let go. Chloe's fingers stiffened. If you don't want to take them, Jessica said, then let go. Chloe's hand slowly pulled back. This time, no one spoke. Jessica put the application form back on the table. Cross the name out right now. Martha gritted her teeth. This form is already filled out wrong. We'll just get a new one later. Jessica looked at her. Fine, then tear it up in front of me right now. Martha's face turned extremely ugly. David finally reached out and picked the application form up from the table. He didn't tear it. He just folded it once and gripped it in his hand. After a few seconds, he pressed it back onto the table. This matter ends here. Jessica looked at the form. Ends here? I will handle it again, he said. Handle it how? Jessica asked. David's patience was clearly running out. Jessica, can you stop nitpicking every single word? Jessica gave a short laugh. No, give me back my letter of introduction for employment before tonight. Martha gritted her teeth. Jessica, don't you regret this? Jessica nodded. Don't worry, I won't regret it this time. When Jessica reached the courtyard gate, Martha's voice came from behind her. Jessica. Jessica stopped in her tracks. Martha chased after her, the stubbornness from earlier no longer on her face. She lowered her voice and said, About the letter of introduction, Auntie will look for it for you later. Jessica looked at her. Not later. Before tonight. Martha's face stiffened. Why are you being so stubborn, child? It wasn't easy for David to make a trip back, and the family still has a bunch of things to discuss. Do you really have to obsess over a piece of paper? Is it really necessary? Yes, it is, Jessica said. Martha choked. Jessica looked at her. That piece of paper is my job. It's not scrap paper to level the tables in your family's home. Martha's face instantly darkened, but people outside were already poking their heads over to look. She forcefully swallowed her anger. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. I'll find it for you tonight. Jessica nodded and continued walking out. She had barely taken 2 steps. Matthew poked his head out from the next room. He was 17 this year and attending a vocational school. In her previous life, every time he came looking for Jessica, he would greet her affectionately as sister-in-law. Later on, when he asked for money, he called her just as sweetly. It was the same now. Sister-in-law. Jessica stopped in her tracks. Matthew walked over with a cheeky smile, as if he hadn't noticed the awkwardness in the room just moments ago. You and my brother can argue all you want, but don't stay mad for real. School needs a materials fee next week. $16.50, he said, scratching his head. My mom said you have some spare cash on hand, so could you spot me for now? Martha's expression changed slightly. Matthew, go back to your room. Matthew froze for a moment. Mom, didn't you say to let sister-in-law? Halfway through his sentence, he caught on and quickly shut his mouth. Jessica looked at him. Don't call me sister-in-law. Matthew laughed awkwardly. Isn't it just a matter of time? Not anymore, Jessica said. The smile on his face froze. The dependent on your brother's military relocation application isn't me, and you shouldn't be coming to me for your materials fee either. Matthew instinctively looked at David. David stood at the doorway, his fingers slowly clenching into a fist. Matthew, he said, his voice very low. Matthew shrank his neck back. Martha immediately tried to smooth things over. He's just a child in school who urgently needs money. What does he know? Jessica nodded. That's exactly why I'm making it clear right now. From now on, whether it's Matthew's tuition, materials fees, or living expenses, do not come to me. Matthew's face instantly turned red. Jessica, what do you mean by that? Exactly what it sounds like. Jessica looked at him. Your last name is Miller and mine is Davis. He opened his mouth but didn't utter the word sister-in-law again. In her previous life, it had been exactly like this, starting with $16.50, which later became $28, $32, and $50. When they spent the money, it was always an emergency. When she kept track of it, she was just being petty. In this life, she wasn't paying a dime. Matthew wanted to say something else, but David spoke up first. Matthew is still in school. Why must you be so petty with him? Jessica gave a short laugh. David, does your family expect me to just hand things over the second you hold out your hands? David's face darkened bit by bit. Matthew's neck flushed red with anger. If you won't give it to me, then don't. Who cares about your money anyway? He said, turning around and storming back toward the room. Just as he lifted the door curtain, Denise was standing right inside. She was clutching a piece of red string in her hand. Seeing everyone looking at her, she quickly hid her hands behind her back. Jessica recognized that red string. It was attached to the key to her family's camphor wood chest. At the bottom of that chest lay 8 feet of cloth ration tickets, a ration ticket for a watch, and the dowry money her mother had left her. In her previous life, Jessica had handed that chest over to David's family before relocating to the military base. Later on, when Denise got married, when Matthew went to school, and when Martha needed to see a doctor for her leg, they took things from inside, one by one. She had asked about it once, and Martha had said, "You've already married into this family. What does it matter who holds on to it?" But now, she wasn't even married yet, and they were already preparing to take from it. Tears streamed down Denise's face. I was just listening to Mom. Jessica looked at her. So you knew the key was mine, and you knew the chest was mine, and you definitely knew the things you were about to take weren't yours. Denise cried even harder. David finally couldn't hold back anymore. Jessica, Denise is still young. Jessica looked at him. Then what about me? He froze. Jessica asked, what am I? No one in the room spoke. Jessica answered for them. I am the one who's just supposed to yield. A breeze blew in from the courtyard gate, lifting a corner of the door curtain. A few people had already gathered outside. Someone whispered that David's family was really going too far. Martha gritted her teeth and suddenly raised her voice. Jessica, are you dead set on driving our family to the grave today? Jessica looked at her. No, I'm just taking back what's mine. A ruthless look flashed in Martha's eyes. Fine, you want to get things clear? Then let's go out into the courtyard and make it clear for everyone. She turned and charged into the middle of the courtyard, grabbed a copper basin hanging on the wall, and struck it hard. Come out, everyone come out and judge for yourselves. The loud clang of the copper basin rang out through the family compound. One by one, doors began to open. Martha stood in the center of the courtyard, her eyes red and her voice trembling. What sin has our family committed? David finally manages to come back to visit, and before the wedding has even taken place, my future daughter-in-law is turning the whole house upside down over a military-dependent quota. She cried as if it were the absolute truth. Chloe stood by the door, twisting the hem of her shirt with her fingers. Matthew stood next to her with his head bowed, and Denise's eyes were red too. The whole family was neatly lined up, while Jessica stood alone at the doorway with nothing in her hands. Martha pointed at Jessica. Tell me, everyone, what kind of daughter-in-law acts like this? She hasn't even married into the family yet, and she's already scheming against her in-laws. The way the surrounding people looked at Jessica slowly began to change. Some frowned, some sighed, and someone whispered, Jessica is usually such a sensible girl. Why is she making such a scene today? Jessica stood her ground, watching Martha cry. Aunt Martha. Martha's crying paused. Jessica looked at her. Are you sure you want to talk about this in the courtyard? Martha looked at the growing crowd, her tears falling again. Let's talk about it then. She slapped her thigh, her voice shaking. Our family is clean and upright. Do you think we're afraid of a soon-to-be daughter-in-law throwing dirty water on us? A few older women from the compound had already gathered around. Mrs. Jenkins spoke first. Jessica, what's going on? Everything was fine. How did it turn into such a mess? Mrs. Clark also chimed in. David has only been back for a few days. You young folks should talk things out properly. Someone else glanced at Chloe. Leaning against the doorframe, Chloe said softly, Everyone, please don't blame Jessica. It's because of my poor health that I've caused trouble for the family. As soon as she said this, several gazes immediately fell on Jessica. It was as if Martha had been waiting for this exact sentence. She wiped her tears and said, Listen to that. Just listen to how sensible Chloe is. Her constitution is weak, so David thought about letting her go to the military base to recover for a while. But Jessica wasn't happy about it. She insisted that Chloe was stealing her dependent quota and even threatened to call off the wedding. Immediately, people in the courtyard frowned. A dependent relocation quota was no small matter. "Jessica," someone said, "being able to relocate with the military is a blessing. So many people wish for it but can't get it." Martha immediately agreed. "Exactly. Our family figured she'd go sooner or later anyway. So what's the difference between a day early or a day late?" Yet she had the nerve to say that our family was mistreating her. Jessica waited until she finished before speaking. "Aunt Martha, are you done?" Martha choked on her words. Jessica looked at the people around them. "Then I'll say a few words as well." David stood at the door. His brows furrowed tightly. He said in a low voice, "Jessica, stop talking." Jessica looked at him. "Your mother asked everyone to judge. Now that it's my turn to speak, you tell me to stop talking?" His face darkened, but with so many people in the courtyard watching, he didn't try to stop her again. Jessica turned around, went into the house, and picked up the military dependent application form from the square wooden table, the one David had folded earlier. David reached out, wanting to hold it down, but Jessica just shot him a look. "If you don't want everyone to see it, then admit right now that this form is unfit for public eyes," Jessica said. David's hand stopped. The courtyard fell quiet. Jessica unfolded the application form. The crease was still on the paper. In the name column, Chloe's name was half written. In the relationship column, the word dependent was written. Jessica held the form up high. "These are the military relocation documents David's family prepared to send off tomorrow to get officially stamped. The name in the name column is Chloe. The relationship column says dependent. I just want to ask one question." Jessica looked at Martha. "What kind of dependent is Chloe to David?" The courtyard instantly went dead silent. Some people craned their necks to get a look. Mrs. Jenkins frowned. How could the relationship column be filled out like that? Mrs. Clark was also stunned. "Isn't Chloe the Parker girl?" Chloe clutched the hem of her shirt, not daring to speak up again. Martha immediately said, "That was just written down for now. It can be changed later." Jessica nodded. "It can be changed. Then why not write my name first?" Martha was left speechless. No one around them spoke. Martha's face shifted, and she bit the bullet, saying, "Everyone knows Chloe has a weak constitution. Is it really necessary for you to obsess over this and not let it go?" "Yes, it is," Jessica said, "because this isn't an issue of whether her constitution is weak or not. It's about you using my quota to secure a spot for her first." Chloe's tears immediately fell. "Jessica, I'm not trying to take your spot." Jessica looked at her. "Then why didn't you cross your name out just now?" Chloe's crying paused. Jessica continued, "You said you didn't have to go. I said okay. Aunt Martha said you were just being polite. So I want to ask you, Chloe, were you truly willing to not go, or were you just saying it for my ears?" Chloe's lips trembled, but she couldn't utter a single word. Someone in the courtyard murmured, "That makes sense. If she really didn't want to go, crossing it out would have been the end of it." Martha grew anxious. "Don't listen to her nonsense. She just can't stand seeing David take care of Chloe." Jessica didn't reply to this. She turned to look at Denise. Denise had been standing at the doorway, but seeing Jessica look her way, she immediately shrank back. "Second matter," Jessica said. "Who has my letter of introduction for the job at the textile factory?" Denise's face instantly turned chalk white. The people in the courtyard perked up even more at this. Letter of introduction? Wasn't Jessica going to work at the textile factory? I heard it was in the propaganda department. A pretty good position. Martha's face looked increasingly grim. She tried to interrupt. "That's our family's business." "No," Jessica said, looking at her. "The letter of introduction was issued to me by the factory office. The name on it is Jessica, not Denise." Denise spoke up, her eyes red. "I just took it to ask around." Her voice trailed off, growing quieter. "It's not like I actually took your job." Jessica nodded. "Then give it back to me." Denise fell silent. Some people in the courtyard had already figured out what was going on. Mrs. Jenkins looked at Martha. Her expression sour. "Martha, that's not right of you all. Jessica hasn't even married into the family yet. How could you let Denise hold on to her job introduction letter?" Martha's face flushed bright red. "I was just keeping it safe for her." "Keeping it safe for me," Jessica said, yet letting Denise take it to the factory to inquire about the position. "Aunt Martha, is this what you call keeping it safe for me?" Martha glared at her. "You're just a young woman. How can your mouth be so sharp?" Jessica looked back at her. "If my mouth wasn't sharp, my things would be gone." As these words fell, a few young wives in the courtyard couldn't hold back a chuckle. Martha couldn't bear the humiliation any longer. She simply started crying even louder. What sin have I committed? She hasn't even married in, and she's already scheming against her in-laws like this. How is David supposed to show his face in the future? Martha cried. Jessica looked at her. Third matter. Martha's crying hitched for a second. Jessica took a small notebook out of her pocket. 2 new cotton quilts, 1 camphor wood chest, $36 in dowry money, 8 feet of cloth ration tickets, a ration ticket for a watch, and the letter of introduction for the job at the textile factory. She flipped the notebook open. These are the things I originally prepared to bring into David's family when we got married. Today, I'm calling off the wedding, so not a single one of these things will cross the threshold of your home. Martha's face changed. Matthew panicked. Then what about my tuition? As soon as he said it, he realized he had let his true thoughts slip. His face flushed bright red as everyone in the courtyard turned to look at him. Jessica asked calmly, "Why are you asking me about your tuition?" Matthew fell silent. Denise bit her lip too, tears falling continuously. She probably wanted to ask what would happen to her cloth ration tickets, but she didn't dare say it out loud. Jessica closed the small notebook. Aunt Martha, you just said I was scheming against your family. But from beginning to end, I haven't taken a single thing from you. I am merely taking back what is mine. Jessica looked at David. He stood there, his face as dark as frost. Does this count as scheming? She asked. He didn't answer. Martha said shrilly, You are failing to support our military. It's not easy for David out there. As his fiancé, instead of helping him secure the home front, you're here nickel and diming over every little thing. Jessica looked right at her. Aunt Martha, his home front bears Chloe's name, not mine. As those words fell, the courtyard went completely silent. Even the older women who had wanted to persuade her earlier shut their mouths. Jessica continued, Since Chloe's name is the one written on the application form, then whoever goes to take care of David, whoever takes care of you, and whoever subsidizes David's younger siblings, it should all be her, not me. Chloe glanced at the application form, her fingers not daring to touch the corner again. Martha also panicked. David said in a low voice, Jessica, don't speak with such finality. His Adam's apple bobbed. The application form can be rewritten. And what about the letter of introduction? Jessica asked. He said nothing. David, Jessica looked at him, does your family actually want to marry me, or do you just want to use me to fill in your gaps? At these words, Martha's face turned completely pale. David's lips pressed into a thin, straight line. Jessica didn't wait for him to answer. Since everyone is here today, I will make myself perfectly clear. The wedding is canceled. Give me back my letter of introduction tonight. If your family doesn't return it, I'll go to the factory office first thing tomorrow morning to report it missing. As for the military-dependent application form, Jessica looked at Chloe. Whoever's name is on it can go. Chloe swayed slightly. The courtyard suddenly fell eerily quiet. Finally, Jessica looked at David. His future shouldn't be built upon the destruction of my way out. After saying that, she turned and walked out of the courtyard. That evening, David delivered the letter of introduction to her house. Her dad was in the courtyard fixing a bicycle. Seeing David walk through the door, the wrench in his hand paused. David, her dad said. David stood at the doorway holding a craft paper envelope in his hand. His military uniform was still neat, but his face looked much worse than it had during the day. Mr. Davis, he said, handing the envelope over, here is Jessica's letter of introduction. Her dad didn't take it. He looked at Jessica. Jessica walked over and took the envelope from David's hands. The edges of the envelope were somewhat crumpled, and the seal had been broken. She pulled the letter of introduction out from inside. The stamp from the textile factory office was still there, and in the name column it still read, Jessica. She looked down at it for 2 seconds before placing it back into the envelope. Thank you, she said. David looked at her. Denise just took it to ask around. Jessica nodded. Okay. His brow twitched. He probably hadn't expected her to just leave it at that. He added, I've already scolded her. Understood, Jessica replied. David's face finally grew even more unpleasant. Jessica, do we really have to talk to each other like this? She looked at him. Then how do you want to talk? He fell silent for a moment. About the military-dependent application form, my mom just wasn't thinking straight. Jessica asked. You didn't see it? He paused. Jessica continued. The form was right by your hand. Half the name was written and the relationship column was filled out too. David, you saw it. His lips pressed into a tight line. A breeze blew in from the courtyard gate, making the bicycle bell ring softly. Her dad set down his wrench, his voice turning stern. David, Jessica's mother passed away early. I'm a rough man and I don't know how to speak pretty words, but how did my daughter's letter of introduction end up in your sister's hands? David said in a low voice. It was poorly handled by our family. Her dad let out a short laugh. Poorly handled? He stood up and wiped his hands on his pant legs. I made 3 trips to the factory office and called in favors from 2 old colleagues. I fought hard to get her this opportunity, and you expect to just brush it off with a poorly handled? David said nothing. Her dad looked at him. Let's just forget about the wedding. David's head snapped up. Mr. Davis. Her dad waved his hand dismissively. I heard about the commotion in the courtyard today. My daughter's name wasn't on the military-dependent application form, and her letter of introduction wasn't in her hands. If this marriage goes through, I'm afraid she won't even be able to keep her own last name in the future. David's face paled slightly. Jessica looked down and tucked the envelope into a drawer. Dad, I'm going to the factory office tomorrow. Her dad nodded. I'll go with you. David looked at her. Jessica. She looked up. He seemed like he had a lot to say, but in the end, he only uttered one sentence. I will handle the military-dependent application form again. There's no need, she said. His Adam's apple bobbed. Are you really not relocating? No, and I'm not getting married either. Okay. He stood there for a long time. No one in the courtyard spoke. Finally, he turned and left. Her dad watched his retreating back. After a moment of silence, he asked, Are you truly sure about this? Jessica closed the drawer. I'm sure. Her dad nodded. Then we'll go to the factory office tomorrow. Early the next morning, Jessica and her dad went to the textile factory. The clerk at the factory office looked at the letter of introduction, then at the certification her dad had brought. Frowning, the clerk said, This letter of introduction was almost expired. Jessica didn't say anything. The clerk took a fountain pen and wrote her name in the registry. Jessica, Propaganda Department temporary worker, year-end evaluation, permanent status upon passing. As they walked out of the factory office, the leaves of the sycamore trees at the entrance rustled in the wind. Her dad walked with his hands clasped behind his back for a few steps, then suddenly said, If your mother were still around, she would definitely be happy. Jessica looked at the red flag sign hanging at the factory gate. Then I'll work hard. Her dad nodded. Work hard. The affairs with David's family didn't end immediately. Martha told anyone who would listen that Jessica was heartless, claiming she had ruined the marriage between the 2 families over a military-dependent quota. But as she kept complaining, the people in the courtyard stopped responding much. Everyone remembered that application form, and they also remembered the letter of introduction that was almost taken away. Later, Chloe still ended up going to the military base. The application form was filled out all over again. The relationship column no longer said dependent, but instead stated temporary visit for caregiving, with Martha acting as the guarantor. Half a month later, Martha had someone bring back a letter. The letter didn't mention anything about a blessing. It only said that Chloe couldn't adjust to the local climate and food, didn't know how to cook, and couldn't wash clothes. Martha's leg ached, but there was no one to take care of her, and she had argued with Chloe several times. When David came back from training, the house was a mess, and the food was cold. By the time the news finally reached Jessica's ears, Mrs. Leher Jenkins said in a very low voice, Jessica, it's a good thing you didn't go. Jessica was standing in front of the bulletin board pasting up the factory's new notices. With her paste brush paused halfway, she gave a short laugh. Didn't they say it was a blessing? Mrs. Jenkins choked on her words and didn't say anything else. Another month passed, and David came back. After work that day, Jessica had just walked out of the textile factory, holding a stack of bulletins, when she saw him standing at the factory gate from a distance. He had lost some weight. He was wearing the same military uniform, but he lacked the certainty he used to have. The elderly guard at the gate asked her, Miss Davis, do you know him? Jessica nodded. I used to know him. David heard this, and his eyes dimmed a little. Jessica handed the bulletins to a colleague, asking them to take them back to the department first, and then walked over to the factory gate. Can I help you? David looked at her, his voice lowered. I came to see you. Now you've seen me, Jessica said. He was silent for a moment. Jessica, Chloe has already gone back to our hometown. Jessica didn't reply. He added, My mom came back too. Jessica nodded. That's good. They couldn't adjust over there. He looked at her. I only know now how hard it was for you before. In her previous life, Jessica had waited to hear those words. You don't know, Jessica said. David froze. Jessica looked at him. You just don't have anyone making things easy for you anymore. His face drained of color bit by bit. People were coming and going at the factory gate, Someone pushed a bicycle out, its bell ringing once. David said in a low voice, "The military-dependent application can be rewritten." "And then what?" Jessica asked. He looked up at her. Jessica continued, "Write my name again, and have me go clean up the mess you all left behind." He was left speechless. Jessica went on, "What about my job? I've already started at the factory. What about my dowry? I'm keeping it for my own use. Your mother's leg, Matthew's tuition, Denise's ration tickets, the gossip Chloe left behind." Jessica looked at him. "Which one of these is a reason why I absolutely must go back?" David's lips moved. "I can change." "Then change," Jessica said. His eyes lit up for a second before Jessica added, "Just don't expect me to be around for it." David stood frozen in place. It took a long time before he asked, "Can we really not go back to the way things were?" "From the moment you all wrote someone else's name on that form, there was no going back," Jessica said. The off-work bell rang throughout the factory. A colleague from the propaganda department stood at the door and called out to her, "Jessica, the director is calling you back to finalize the draft." "Coming," Jessica called back. David was still standing there. Jessica didn't say anything more. She turned around and walked back through the factory gates. The bulletin board was still waiting for her. The newly pasted notice had a corner lifted by the wind. She pressed it down with her brush, added another layer of paste, and the paper slowly flattened out smoothly. The first line on it read, "Textile Factory Propaganda Department, Temporary Personnel Evaluation Schedule." Her name was listed third, Jessica. Jessica looked at it for 2 seconds and put the brush back into the bucket. The sound of machines came from the factory buildings. It was a loud, rumbling noise, but it was far more reassuring than all the crying, cajoling, and blaming in David's family. The evening wind blew in from the factory gate, carrying the scent of new fabric. Jessica picked up the remaining bulletins and walked toward the office building. The elderly guard called out from behind, "Jessica, don't forget your lunchbox." Jessica looked back at the gatehouse windowsill. The aluminum lunchbox was still sitting there, with a small piece of white tape stuck to it that bore her name. Jessica. Years later, the rhythmic hum of the textile factory had become the soundtrack of Jessica's success. She passed her evaluation with flying colors, securing her permanent role. With a steady income and her mother's dowry safely in her own hands, she built an independent, vibrant life entirely on her own terms. Meanwhile, David's family remained trapped in a cycle of endless bickering over money, chores, and unfulfilled expectations. The chaotic household dragged his once promising future down, leaving him to watch Jessica from afar with bitter, quiet regret. Looking back, Jessica finally smiled. Walking away that day wasn't a loss. It was the exact moment she truly reclaimed her destiny.
What a satisfying ending! Jessica proved that your independence and career are your best safety nets. Walking away and setting firm boundaries is how you take back control. What did you think of her bold move? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe!